rules of order cheat sheet.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, don't do that to me. Oh, don't do that to me. Don't just shut down. No, we're not.
Ready? Okay. Let's go ahead and call to order this Tuesday, October 22nd meeting of the Inglewood Planning and Zoning Commission. Can you take the roll?
Mr. Adams?
Here?
Ms. Fuller?
Here.
Excuse me, Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Marshall is absent. Ms. Austin?
Here.
Mr. Freemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Patinos is absent. Mr. Kenton?
Here.
And Chair Townley.
Here. Do we have a motion? Oh, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the September 17th minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion or edits of those minutes? See none? Okay.
Mr. Adams?
Oh, do you vote to approve the minutes of September 17th? The minutes for September 17th?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Fuller?
Abstain.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Austin?
Abstain.
Mr. Freemeyer?
Abstain.
Mr. Kenton?
Yes.
Chair Townley.
Yes.
I don't think I was here. Was I here? I don't think I was here. Yeah, that's why I abstained.
Okay. Okay, next on the agenda is the public forum. This is the part of the evening where members of the public can come forward and talk to us about anything other than the public hearing, which there'll be another opportunity during the public hearing to come forward and provide any input or testimony. So we'll allow 3 minutes per speaker. And the first person I have on the list is Camilla Beets. Kamala, sorry.
Thank you, members of the commission. Pamela Beets, 3224 South Delaware Street. My comments tonight will probably touch on the public hearing, but I want to speak in general right now. I'm here because I love Inglewood. I love my home. I like my neighbors, and I chose to live here. And what I see is the destruction of our neighborhoods with this kind of overdevelopment and building. And I also am greatly concerned that residents, I don't feel, are really adequately informed of what's happening in our neighborhoods. As an example, I don't even know for sure, my neighborhood is labeled transitional. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that means, what it holds for the future, for myself or my neighbors. And I spoke at City Council last night, and the mayor had asked me what I was afraid of. I'm afraid I'm not going to have a place to live because I don't believe this development is going to allow me either financially to stay in my home or to like living in Inglewood anymore by being just the quality of life issues, just being overwhelmed by this large commercial. I call it commercial development because I don't think it's in the interest of Inglewood. I think it's in the interest of outside development issues or persons. Most of us in this room chose to live here because we like the neighborhood, because we like the homes. They might be a little goofy from the 40s or the 20s, but we like them. And I think we're losing that, and that really bothers me. And I doubt if let me rephrase that. I don't know how many of us can afford to move and go out and get a new mortgage. And allowing this kind of development and the destruction of our history, our homes, our quality of life, I think to me is very disturbing. And I don't think there's been adequate information given to residents here. And as I spoke last night, we've been called stakeholders in many different kinds of things, but we're more than stakeholders. We're shareholders. We foot the bills. We have the financial interest in Inglewood. Not only do we have the emotional interest, we have the financial interest. And I don't believe City Council and maybe other entities of city government are watching out for the people who already live here, who pay the bills, who have put their lives here, who shop at Safeway or King Soopers or the restaurants, whatever it is. I've lived here for over about 20 years. My grandparents had a restaurant at Old Hamden in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Littleton. I think that we all have an investment here, and I see that investment being just disappearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on the list, we have Marcy Brown.
Good evening, everyone. It's Marcy Brown, District 1. Kind of would like to piggyback off of what Ms. Beach just said. At one point, my family had 3 homes in Inglewood. 2 were in the R1 zones, and 1 was in the R2B zones, R2B zone, I should say. And when this house was bought in the R2B zone, this was 1974, and I could never have imagined what would happen to my block. We have 6 duplexes on my block. It has been disruptive, and there are drainage problems because these massive buildings are built so high, and I have one across the street from me that is literally pitched like a barn. And when it rains really hard, you can see the water going right off the roof into the neighbor's yard. And the extensions are right to each neighbor. So that water is being into the neighbor's yard. So my concern is that also, is the drainage and the pitch of the roof. And with this other lot that you're speaking about tonight, I mean, seems to me like it's a very small lot. And I don't know where the drainage would go. I kind of took a drive by it tonight. It was kind of dark, so it just feels like it's very small, and that we just keep crowding more and more people into very, very tight spaces. And I love Inglewood too. I mean, my family was here. I have spent most of my life in Inglewood, and I love this city. And last night I spoke about how maybe all zonings should be opened up for development instead of just certain people getting hit by these developments. So I don't really have too much to say about the lot, except that it just seems to me that it's pretty small. And I just wonder if, regarding the roof peak, how that's going to go, if it's going to go, the drainage is going to go into the next lots. And it just seems small to me. So I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Next for public forum, we have Maureen White.
Good evening. My name is Maureen White. I live in the 3200 block of South Grant Street. I have been listening to what's gone on with the infrastructure problems and the drainage, the flooding that occurred, and because I have a flood policy on a different property outside of Inglewood, I finally decided I'm going to look, because I hear people like candidates telling those victims of the flood, get flood insurance. So I looked at it. This is a policy through the Natural Catastrophe Insurance Program, and it's underwritten by Lloyd's of London. And like I said, I've had it since 2008, and I started looking at exclusions. Okay, one exclusion is loss or damage arising out of acts or decisions, including the failure to act or decide of any person, group, organization, or governmental body relating to faulty, inadequate, or defective planning, zoning, development, surveying, sitting, design specifications, workmanship, repair, construction, renovation, remodeling, grading, compaction, materials used in repair, construction, renovation, or remodeling, or maintenance of all or part of any property on or off the premises. I think the city of Inglewood could be held responsible right now for the flooding that's going on in Inglewood. Because if I'm paying for flood insurance and it's not going to cover this, but it's saying here that that is the fault of the government agency in Inglewood, and planning and community development. And the other thing that disturbed me, I read another exclusion, would be the reduction in rental value, the reduction in the market value, or the saleability of property insured by this policy, or any cost or expenses related to thereof. Thank you.
And next on the list for public forum is C. Ann Dickerson.
C. Ann Dickerson, District 1. It's going to be a little disjointed because I left my notes at home. I got into a hurry and I don't even remember what I was going to say. But you're talking about a couple of things tonight, and I don't want to talk about the public hearing right now, but you're going to be talking about bulk playing. And most of us have been complaining about this for a while because what I don't understand is you're only talking about the bulk playing, but the issue is the height differential that goes along with that bulk playing change that you made. 17 feet in bulk playing allows developers to build 32 feet. And not just, it's not restricted to 32 feet. If they've been averaging the roof height. So we'd like to go back to what it was before, 12 feet. But I think the height could go up a little bit, maybe to 25 feet, but not to 32 feet, and definitely not to average. We have to be very careful about that. And there's been a lot of confusion, and I'm not sure anybody really knows where 17 feet applies and where it doesn't. Because there was an R2 property that they wanted to build, and they were sent by community development to the Board of Adjustments and Appeals because they said 12 feet was required. And they denied him to go to 17 feet, but my understanding is that 17 feet bulk playing applies to all districts except some particular instances. And I'm not quite sure how that works because it seems to be very erratically applied. The house across the street from me was recently built, and it's more than 40%. I'm in R1A, and it's more than a 40% lot coverage. He's got an overhang roof over several hundred square feet, and it's just, he's got lots and lots of concrete everywhere, and he's covered a lot of things, and he's got 3 different roof pitches, and one of them's 40 feet, and one of them's only like 27 feet, and he's directed all the water to the neighboring properties, all the drainage, and yet he was ordered to change that after his certificate of occupancy was issued. He was, he had it all wrong. And then they put it up. Then he changed it. Once they made him change it, he waited a month, and then he put it up. So we'd like the bulk plane back to 12 feet and limit the height much lower than 32 feet.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, did anyone else want to speak for public forum that didn't have a chance to sign up? Okay. Next on the agenda is a public hearing. We have case 2019-12, 3146 South Pennsylvania Street, urban lot development. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. Oh, I'm sorry. I seconded.
Do you vote to open the public hearing? Oh, she couldn't hear you. If you can just say your vote again. She couldn't hear you. Carl.
So yes,
Yes.
it's just to open discussion.
Okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So just to give an overview of what will happen with the public hearing, first we'll hear from staff. They'll provide a presentation, the opportunity for the applicants to provide a presentation, and then time for public testimony, and then some rebuttal if needed from staff or the applicant. So staff, would you like to start out?
I do. Will Charles, planner. Good evening, commissioners. Let me pull this PowerPoint real quick. The case before us tonight, the applicant is requesting approval to construct a one-unit dwelling on an urban lot. A public hearing is required in front of Planning and Zoning Commission per the Unified Development Code, section 1694, which deals with non-conforming lots. An urban lot is defined as a legal lot of recording existing on the effective date of this title, which is February 23rd, 2004, where the lot width or lot area is less than the minimum standard for a one-unit dwelling on a small lot in the zone district in which the lot is located. So the minimum for, if you were going to subdivide a property today, the minimum requirement would be 50 feet in this zone district, which is R1C. This property, as well as all the properties to the northeast, south, and west, are all located in the R1C zone district. The subject property is a 25 by 125, so it is a 3,125 square foot lot. This property qualifies as an urban lot in the R1C zone district. Under Table 1661.1 of the Unified Development Code, it provides dimensional requirements for urban lots of record that at one time contained or currently contain a one-unit dwelling on or before the effective date of this title, which again was 2004. However, for vacant urban lots that do not meet the definition are required to follow the same process for development as a non-conforming lot would, which includes this public hearing that we're having tonight. It does not appear that the property has ever had a
Could you speak a little slower, please?
Sure.
I'm
Sorry.
a slow processor. Thank you.
This property originally, when it was annexed into the city of Inglewood in 1940, part of the original city of Inglewood, it was in the R1 zone district. This R1 zone district specified that a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet, but it did not require a minimum lot frontage. The 1940 ordinance did permit the development of lots smaller than 6,000 square feet, as long as there was a separate lot prior to the 1940 zoning ordinance. So 1939, smaller than 6,000, you couldn't subdivide into smaller though. It's unclear when this property became a separate lot, but all found records for the property show it as being a separate lot. The city has revised its zoning ordinance multiple times, in 1955, 1963, 1985, and 2004. These revisions did not permit the development of lots in the R1C zone district with less than the 6,000 square, with less than 4,500 square feet and 37 lineal feet of frontage. These are for what's considered small lots in the zone district. So again, you could only have that 50 feet is the minimum you could subdivide into, but it kind of was a stopgap for the miscellaneous properties that were already smaller than that. In 2015, or in 2014, sorry, the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as City Council, enacted amendments to the UDC that permitted the development of urban lots, which is what this lot is today, with a minimum of 3,000 square feet of lot area and a minimum of 25 feet of lot frontage, which is what this property has. The proposed house on the subject property would be approximately a 1,200 square foot footprint with 2 stories, so approximately 2,400 square feet. The proposed site plan complies with the minimum lot area, setbacks, lot coverage, height, bulk plan requirements for this zone district. Sorry, let me get some water. So per to the UDC, again, the 1694, it talks about non-conforming uses. A non-conforming lot may be used only for a use permit in the zone district, so for the R1C, single-family residential. The Planning and Zoning Commission may waive or modify lot coverage, lot area, bulk plane height, setback, lot width, or other requirements for any non-conforming lot that it finds that the proposed development meets the criteria listed. This property is, or this owner is not proposing any sort of amendments or modifications beyond what's already listed out in the code. But the criteria are that a lot cannot otherwise be used for any purpose permitted within the zone district applicable to the property. Being a 3,100 approximately square foot lot, the only allowed use on this property would be a single-family residential lot. The waiver or modification, if granted, is necessary to afford relief with the least modification possible of the development or dimensional standards otherwise applicable to the property. Again, they're not requesting any sort of modifications to what's already written in the code underneath the dimensional standards. The third criteria is the proposed development is consistent with the spirit and intent of the comprehensive plan. This development would meet the objective LIV 1-1, 1-2, and 2-1 that speak of things like diverse housing stock, having for different income groups and things such like that. The fourth criteria is the lot coverage, bulk plane height, setbacks, and massing of the proposed development will not vary substantially from the surrounding properties or alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So as mentioned previously, they're not asking for any modifications beyond what is already allowed in the code. So it has the same bulk plane as other, as the rest of the houses in this zone district, as well as the same max height. In terms of the mass, the proposed living area of the house would be approximately 2,400 square feet, again with a footprint of about 1,200. The neighboring properties on either side have a little less than 900 square feet each, one being 888 and one being 864. Many homes on the block have structure widths that are less than 25 feet, meaning, if you looked at the front of the building, the actual house itself is under 25 feet. Most of the actual lots on this block are 50 feet, but the actual structures themselves are less than 25 feet in width. The proposed home will take place of what is currently just a garage on the rear of this property. Most homes on this block are only 1 story. However, back in, actually I didn't write it down on my notes, but I believe about 2015, 2016, there was a pop-top addition done to a house just northwest of this on the same lot. The final criteria is the proposed development is compatible with the established development patterns and the intent of the zone district. This block contains single-family homes as it's a R1C zone district. The proposed home is compatible with these established development patterns and the intent of this zone district. In summary, staff recommends approval of this case, finding that the only permitted use for the lot is a 1-unit dwelling on an urban lot. The proposed house footprint has approximately 1,200 square feet of habitable space. The proposed house is consistent with parts of the comprehensive plan. The proposed site plan and elevations comply with the lot area, lot coverage, lot width, height, setback, bulk plane. and as well that they're not requesting any sort of modifications from what's already in the dimensional standards. And I can answer any questions you might have. I realized I sped up a little bit at the end there, but I forgot.
You could be on a FedEx commercial. But you may be too young to
You know,
realize what
I'm shooting
talking
for the
about.
medical ones, but FedEx works too for me.
Anyone like to start with questions?
Oh, I can start. What are the setbacks between the two lots, adjacent lots?
Setbacks from the property line, or the
Right.
side setbacks?
I couldn't see that I didn't see
Right.
anything on the drawings that was a
it's
3 foot or 5 foot or what it was.
3 feet. 3 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's listed on this slide that the max width of this house will be 19 feet. So the lot
Yeah,
is,
but to
the lot is
translate
20.
that, I didn't quite
Right,
get
yeah, so
that.
the lot's 25 feet wide, so 19, 3 and 3.
Okay. A little tough to mow your back lawn.
Sorry?
A little tough to mow your back lawn.
Potentially.
Have to go all the way around to the alley. Just a comment.
Well, the garage will be on the back side, so any sort of
But
lawn.
there's a front lawn and a back lawn, presumably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a point of clarification, I think it's to the southeast is where there was a pop top, and it was at the corner of Eastman and South Pearl.
Okay.
So, and I was looking for somewhere in here, I think in the description, you said this would be, the new proposed building would be to the south of the existing house. I think that's actually north, so just as a point of clarification. All right, just
Yeah.
just a Scrivener's error. I just wanted to point that out. But so there's no concern going down that people thought it'd be to the north or south versus north, et cetera. So compasses are wonderful. You can also find them on your phone. But with regard to the lot itself, this lot has been platted as a separate lot for time immemorial? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And if there was an existing home on there today, would this be before this body?
No. So if it had ever had a home, even if it was, say, built in 1954, scraped in 1956, it would not need to come in front of the board.
Okay, so by virtue of the fact that in 2014, the Uniform Development Code was changed with, as I recall, a unanimous vote of this body and a unanimous vote of the city council, then otherwise it would not come before us, correct? Okay. And so this lot is 3,125 square feet, and they're planning on having a
1,200.
cover, with this lot is sufficient, given their minimum square feet of 3,000, they've got 125 square feet to spare. Correct. Okay. And with regard to, and this may be getting ahead of it, but I just want to make sure it's a matter of the record, with regard to any runoff from this property, would they be subject to all the standard rules and conditions of any development regardless of lot size? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, and is that something that staff normally would inspect?
Yes, our public works department, they require that, downspouts be poured in towards street or alley, and that, runoff be directed towards the street or alley.
Okay.
So public right away.
Okay. And is there any, are you aware of other 25-foot lots that have been developed in
Yes.
the recent past?
So I actually went ahead and put a slide at the end of this. So we've had two since the ordinance was passed in 2014. The left one, I believe, is on Pearl Street. Don't quote me on that. I believe 4200 block of Pearl Street. And then the other one is on, I believe, the 4600 block of Delaware. That one was approved by this board mid-2018. The other one being, I think, early 2015.
Okay. And I think there's also, just as a point of clarification, I think there's also one on, at the 3300 block, just south of Floyd on, Emerson on the west side.
Potentially. I believe these are the only two that have come through this process, but
Right, 'cause
there,
the
yeah,
other
there are
one-
probably other ones
The other one
that,
had a house on it, so
Yeah.
there was no discussion.
yeah.
I remember these coming through, were there, now that they're up, do we have, I mean, is the city receiving complaints on a regular basis about,
Not that I'm aware of, no.
so to your knowledge, those homes go up and they're just as habitable, enjoyable as the rest of the neighborhood, as far as from a city standpoint?
They appear to be houses in the neighborhood and, I can't speak to that, but, I mean, I think the house looks nice for the, in general, yeah.
Okay, I appreciate you clarifying these points. Thank you very much.
Anyone else have questions for staff at this time? Carl?
Just for a little clarification, I looked up the lot size on Arapahoe County website, and it listed as .0680. And if you multiply that out, it comes out to be 2,964 square feet, which is under the 3,000
Yeah.
foot mark. Slightly under, but it is under.
So with those county measurements, I'm not exactly sure how they get their exact numbers. As far as the way, so this property is, so all of Inglewood was originally split into a 25 by 125 grid system, right? And so a lot of times what would end up happening is you would take, lot 23 and lot 24, combine them together, make one parcel. So this property is one of those 25 by 125 foot lots. So 25 by 125, 31,000.
There's three of them, right? 12,
So
13,
there
and
is-
14?
Sorry?
12, 13, and 14, aren't there three of them?
So I believe 12 and 13 are, this could be backwards between the numbers, but 12 and 13 are on one parcel, and lot 14 is on one parcel.
Carl, could you help me again? What was the percentage that they showed? It was
The acreage is .0680
Acres?
acres, yes. And there's 43,560 acres in square feet in an acre. Is it common for the, like these pictures here don't have much of an eave on them, but the drawing that you had
Right, I mean,
shows a 3-foot eave that actually goes out to the property line? Is that standard?
so in this drawing, the angled line is their depiction of the bulk plane. That's not part of the house. So, I mean, as far as, projections into the setbacks and things like that, there's a ratio of, setback to inches that you can project. You couldn't project all the way to the property line. This is, or not obviously, but this drawing has the bulk plane as that angle on there. That's not the roof overhangs.
Does the developer or the resident there have an actual drawing of what they're gonna build?
So their drawings are the ones in front of you right now. They're preliminary at this point. After this meeting, they'd be required to go through the full, building permit process where it would then be reviewed. Again, for all of the zoning requirements, as well as, the building department, public works, utilities, and all of those. All the other departments were given these preliminary drawings, and they did not have any concerns with the development as shown.
It's not gonna be a block house where you have multiple squares piled on top of one another? Like most of
From what I understand, it'll be a modern architectural design. The applicant can probably speak a little more to what their vision of the house is, though.
And that drawing there shows basically a little porch and a kitchenette. Will that be included, is that living space? Is that included in the 20, that's not included in the 2,400 square feet?
It's not included in the 2,400 square feet, correct? Yeah, as from my understanding, and again, the applicant probably can clarify a little more if I'm off base on this, that thing is mostly the stairwell to get up to the roof, as well as, you know, a small kitchenette, maybe, you know, a sink, that kind of thing.
Now, to have a kitchenette in there, it's going to have a 7-foot ceiling and only be about 4 or 5 foot wide. Be very small.
Anyone else have questions? And I just have a couple points of clarification just to revisit. For this decision tonight, this is a decision that the Planning and Zoning Board can make, not a recommendation to City Council. That's within our purview to be able to make this decision. And just to revisit what Mr. Freemeyer had asked, there's only been 2 of these urban lots developed through this process in the since 2014. There hasn't been a proliferation of them that has completely changed the character of several neighborhoods?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to ask about, has the city developed any sort of plan or something like that to purchase some of these lots that otherwise wouldn't be developable for some sort of stormwater drainage or something like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all I have right now. Go ahead and hear from the applicant.
Yes. Mark Sweezy, 3150 South Pennsylvania Street. I want to thank the commission for taking the time to look at this evening, and especially also want to thank Will. He's been very helpful in guiding me through the process here. I'm here this evening with my wife, Kathy, and our daughter is working this evening. She wasn't able to make it. But we moved into our current home in February of 2005. And I'll do the math for you. That's almost 15 years. We really love the community. We enjoy living here. And we've seen a lot of change over those 15 years. We've seen some of the more dilapidated homes completely scraped, replaced with brand new, beautiful homes. We've seen several homes completely renovated, and we've noticed that tax dollars have gone to build new schools and completely renovate several schools as well. So we've really noticed a lot of improvement in the city of Inglewood, and we just really appreciate the neighborhood that we live in. People who love their community invest in it, and people who are invested in their community, they love it and care for it. And we would like to invest in our community. I'll be honest, I think probably most of us, given our preference, would live next to a vacant lot. And when I think of a vacant lot, I think of a nice green space, maybe some trees or a fountain. Well, this is a vacant lot that is about 100 feet of gravel with a detached garage. It's not aesthetically pleasing to me. And honestly, as we thought about it, we thought, well, is there a higher and a better use that we could put this property to? And the Planning and Zoning Commission, in their wisdom, has zoned this neighborhood for single-family residential. And to that end, we propose professionally designed, professionally built, professionally landscaped, single-family home. We think it would enhance the community. It obviously would increase the tax base and provide a comfortable place for our family to enjoy for years to come. And that's really the long and short of it. Unless you have questions, I'm done.
Could you just walk us through a little bit of some of what you've proposed?
Sure. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the plan view, or a bird's eye view looking down from the top. And the larger rectangle is the lot itself. The rectangle inside would be the proposed structure. And obviously, we'd like to maximize the square footage, so we're looking at 2 stories. We plan to provide off-street parking in the back, off the alley, with a driveway and garage. And we thought that a flat roof with an outdoor living space might be convenient. Now, most likely, we would put a little notch in the side of the house here with a small patio, and then from the second floor, an outdoor staircase going up to the rooftop. And then we're thinking possibly put just a small space where we could have maybe a sink, maybe a mini fridge, just so to make it more convenient for entertaining on the outdoor living space. Let's see. So that's what's depicted here. It would just be a small little enclosure with, like I say, a mini fridge, maybe a sink, not really much to it. Also, I'd like to point out, I've heard some concern about drainage. This is the front of the property here, and I've shot the elevations here. There's a pretty good slope here, so any runoff would easily drain toward the street.
And then just a question. You are the property owner to the south of the property, correct?
That's correct.
This lot's next to you, and then you have another property north of that, or someone else lives in the property
Yeah,
north of
we
that?
have neighbors on both sides.
And then have you had a conversation at all with the folks to the north about plans?
Yes, I did talk to Ellen, and we hold her in high regard. We've entertained her in our home, and we've been entertained. She has a lovely garden, and that's really went into our decision-making about putting a flat roof on the structure. We felt that it would be less likely to cast as much of a shadow on her property.
Great, can I open it up for questions for you?
So are you living in the house to the south?
Yes.
Currently, which is on 2 lots, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you'll build this and move into this one?
Our intention would be to move into the new house and then sell the house that we're living in currently.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, thanks.
Have you talked to the neighbor on the north there? That's basically your eave is is at the property line, and it's going to block almost all the sun. They'll have no sun in the wintertime in their windows, and their garden will be shaded in the summer.
So there actually would be no eaves at all. The line that's depicted here, that is a representation of the bulk plane. So this would be the top of the roof here, and it would just go straight down. This would be a small parapet wall with a flat roof.
So the angle, the 45-degree angle lines, that's not actually the roof?
No, that's simply a representation of the bulk plane. To demonstrate that if we do build this on the rooftop, it would fit within the bulk plane.
Okay. Have you talked to your neighbor about building this?
Yes, I had a conversation with Alan, yes.
They're not here?
I believe she is here.
Oh, okay. Guess we'll wait for her.
Anyone else have questions right now for the applicant? Going once, going twice. Okay, for now, we might call you back up.
Okay.
Can I just ask a couple clarification questions before we go into public hearing, or the public testimony? Currently, right now, do we have any design regulations that would be applicable to single-family residential homes? As-
No, there's no aesthetic requirements or anything of that nature.
Okay. And then for a different kind of property, if it was on a lot that was larger square footage, met the bulk plane, also met the setbacks, would there be some other recourse for a neighbor or someone like that to complain about shading or anything like that?
I mean, in the code, there's no, considerations or anything that talks about, shading and things like that onto neighboring properties. So, I mean, as far as they would have to meet the setback requirements, the max height, those kind of things, but no, there's no requirement as far as, light or like a light easement or anything like that.
And another question, in a typical, say we're in a PUD process, we might have different criteria or abilities within our code to discuss things like design regulations or negotiate more with the builder. Right. Within what we have for this sort of decision, do we have that ability?
No, I mean, as far as, meeting the standards that are in the code, they have to do that. In a PUD process, it's essentially wiping the underlying zoning clean, and they kind of write their own ordinance that we then get to tell them to change things from there. And in a standard use by right development or development like this, no.
It would essentially be that you're meeting whatever the underlying zoning is,
Correct.
no matter what. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a point of clarification, so if somebody were to come forward and there were no neighbors, okay, would we have this same discussion? So in other words, if the whole lot, every lot on the street were blank, would we be having this discussion based on the code, regardless of whether neighbors were here or not?
About the aesthetics
No,
or?
about the ability to build a building on a lot that hadn't been built on previously.
Well, we would have to have this public hearing, regardless of neighbors or not. If every single lot if this block was completely vacant and every single lot was 25 feet in lot width, we would have to have a public hearing for each one to be developed.
Are you aware of any laws, either local ordinances or otherwise, that protect a view of any particular property?
Locally, no. There are cities out there. Austin's one, for example.
Right, but in Inglewood, we don't have a code that you're aware of that protects a view. Is that
No.
correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to public testimony, and this is an opportunity for the public to come forward and provide comments and their input regarding this case. All comments should be directed towards the commission. We will have a 3-minute limit on comments, And I will call forward our first one, and now I'm going to get it wrong again. Camilla. Yes, and we're not able to have a discussion back and forth. It would just be comments towards us. Thank you.
Pamela Beats, 3224 South Delaware Street. I'm here because I have concerns about building and development in Inglewood in general. And listening to especially some of the commission's questions, I even have more questions and concerns, because I don't think we have a uniform architectural code. We don't have a way to preserve our architectural integrity. We don't have a way to preserve the well-being of our gardens or our sunlight or our views. And I think we're at the mercy, not only of this board, but of builders who want to come in and really change the characteristics of our neighborhood. And that, I really think we have something special in Inglewood, and I would be really sad to see that disappear. And I can understand maybe wanting to upgrade homes and do that type of thing, but when I saw those photos, those don't reflect Inglewood. They don't reflect the neighborhood around them. They don't reflect the neighborhood and the neighbors. And some of the commission's comment that you don't hear dissent, you should walk around and knock on some doors, because I know when I see my neighbors at Target or Safeway or King Soopers, or we're out mowing our lawns, everybody's unhappy with this, pretty much. There are very few people I talk to in my immediate area. They're not greatly concerned about this issue. But the reason they don't come forward, either to city council or meetings like this, is because they believe they have no power, they have no input, and they have no regard for their opinions. There's only a few of us here tonight, but I think it's because we're willing to tell you this.
Are you speaking specifically about this property or just in general?
This property, and I think in general. So I'll go back to this property specifically. It does not seem some of the plans are going to fit in with the neighborhood. There's not very many neighbors here to speak what their feelings are. And this idea that we can use this bulk plane issue to kind of circumvent building standards and zoning and change our neighborhoods, I find greatly concerning. And I may not have that right. Maybe I don't understand it completely. But that's what it appears to me. And I think this is another example of development happening in our neighborhoods that changes our neighborhoods dramatically and profoundly, and that we don't have a standard to build to. We don't have a standard that neighbors can be happy with. And so I am against any further development until Inglewood comes up with these standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Ellen Hertzman.
I'm Ellen Hertzman. I live at 3140 South Pennsylvania. I'm the immediate neighbor to the north. I've owned my house since 2002, and Nancy knows, because I've been working with her with the Inglewood Energy Sustainability Grant Program, that I'm in the middle of my dream project of renovating my house. I'm finishing the basement, and I'm redoing the kitchen in my 1935 house. And I poured my heart into my garden. One neighbor made a plaque for me that says Inglewood Gardens on it and gave it to me. And Kathy wrote a song about my gardens. The Sweezies and I have been friendly neighbors, and so I really appreciated it when they let me know that they had in mind to do some building on their property. But I had had the impression that it was going to be a one-story building, and even though it was 3 feet from my property line, I thought that I could probably live with a one-story building. But when I looked into it and saw that they have a 2-story building in mind, my heart just sank, because a huge part of the reason why I bought my house is because it has so much south light. In fact, in my new kitchen, I'm installing even more south-facing windows to collect all that light. It's so important for me and my plants and my garden and my solar panels. And I am struggling right now because I want to support my neighbors in the dream that they have for their property. But I want to live in my house for the rest of my life. That's why I'm renovating it now. And without the sun coming in the winter, it won't be my house. So I just want to put it to you that when I drove around my neighborhood, there are, as you pointed out, 2 houses within blocks and blocks and blocks of me that have 2 stories on a single lot. And the pictures that were posted up there didn't show that they were just towering over their neighbors. And our block has one 2-story building that is a new building that you mentioned, and it was not a pop top, it was a scrape, and it's every single neighbor on our block thinks it's an eyesore and doesn't fit in with the 1-story houses on our block. Every neighbor thinks that, but it's on a 2-lot property. So it does not impinge as much on its neighbors as I'm afraid this 2-story house would impinge on me. So I just want to present that to you, and if we want to keep the character of our neighborhoods, please think of the near neighbors first. Thanks.
Next, we have Noelle Atkins.
I do. Noel Atkins, 3226 South Pennsylvania. I want to thank you first for having this forum where people can speak on these changes with all the development going on in the metro area. It doesn't seem like there's maybe as much thought going on into the different communities.
Can I pause you for 1 second?
Yes.
Nancy, could you start the timer? Sorry.
And so I appreciate that this is an opportunity to speak to these changes. I walk by the property in question every morning, and through that neighborhood, there are, as was stated, in the block in question, one single 2-story home, and in my block, one to the south of that, only a single 2-story home. Now, those houses again are on full lots, and so there's they are set back from their neighbors a decent amount. Now, my main concern, I have to say, is somewhat selfish in that I walk by Ellen's garden so often, and my wife and I take trips, usually on a weekly basis, just to go up and stare at her garden. And the idea that a house 3 feet from her property line and as tall as it is would basically block all of her sunlight and essentially cause her to lose her garden or change it to a shade garden or some other opportunity is just a little sad, honestly, from my point of view. And I feel a little, from coming to this session, I feel a little unclear about what the lot size is for this lot, and that the plans don't appear to be something final that can be seen whether it fits in with the lot and with the neighborhood, but rather it's approving it and then really kind of seeing what house goes up. some other questions about, will an accessory dwelling unit be allowed on the property, or an accessory unit, or a shed? And how much after a garage goes up and you have the main unit, how much of the remaining property is actually there for green space? And a big piece of that is, where does the water go when it rains, if the lot is mostly covered? And it's true, everything can be pushed off onto the street, but there's no real, grass area for that rain to be absorbed. So again, I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Next on the list, we have Maureen White.
I do. Maureen White, 3271 South Grant Street. We have invested in our homes, and in my family, it's a home that's belonged in the family for over 100 years. It is not dilapidated. We have kept it up. And at one time, my family owned 5 homes on that block. And a different time period, my parents' first home after they were married was in the 3200 block of South Pearl Street, very close. And it was a little house on the back of a lot. I do not deny these people a right to build on that urban lot. What they want to build, I am totally opposed to. There are no flat roof homes in that neighborhood that I have ever seen. And the setbacks may be 3 feet on this property, but somehow I got the idea that the home they're currently living in is closer to the property setback than 3 feet. And my heart goes out to Helen. So the height of this, the idea that they need more square footage than the houses around them, that's unacceptable for me. And this is an example of exactly why you all need to go back and look at the bulk plan. We're hearing the reasons tonight for that. And we came to a meeting not too long ago where this board, with the exception of, I think, one person on it, approved ADUs. This past summer, I and a few other people gathered 500 signatures of registered voters in Inglewood who wanted to repeal that ADU ordinance. And if I hadn't been involved in a car accident and a family surgery, that would be on this ballot. So try to listen to the citizens, okay? Thank you.
Next, we have Marcy Brown.
I do. It's Marcy Brown, 2980 South Sherman. I agree with everything Maureen White just said, but I would like to take another maybe take on this whole thing, is that I recently did a slideshow in front of council, and I know that when the planner spoke about public works drainage, I know how this works. I showed, I believe, 12 slides, and before you can get a certificate of occupancy, Public Works needs to come out, make sure that the extensions from the drain pipe are aimed towards the street and the alleys. But at the same time, after that certificate of occupancy is signed, the neighbors can move them to the side, and there is no code in our enforcement code that says, oh, you have to move them back to the street or to the alley. I've checked. So when you're talking only 3 feet from another neighbor, I think that's just not enough room. And I mean, I've been dealing with this, and I mean, I don't, how can you have a certificate of occupancy and it not be in code. I don't understand that. Another problem that I have is that I do not believe that this encapsulates the charm of the neighborhood. I know in my neighborhood with 6 duplexes, it's just a hodgepodge, it's a mess. And people have lost their sunlight. And people have complained about extensions being moved, and that now those extensions are going into the foundation of their house. And there is nothing they can do except complain to the city, and the city tells them it's a civil matter. So the person who's getting the water runoff either has to hire a lawyer or they have to fix it themselves. I don't see where that's fair. Because to me, the developer caused the problem. You know, no one asked for a duplex or any of these multi-dwellings to be built by them. And I know so many people who have had their sunlight blocked that it's like, it's ridiculous. I even know a man who put solar panels on his home, you know, regular single home dwelling, put solar panels on. Now he's got 2 duplexes on both sides of his house. And he says, why did I even spend the money for these solar panels? I don't even get any sun anymore. So I think that is an issue that we have to look at about sunlight. Also, I know Mr. Adams brought up about the county measurements. When I was doing county measurements for another problem that I had on the north side of me when they wanted to build one of these huge dwellings, I first spoke to the county, and they gave me a number, what that square footage was. Then I went to the city, spoke to a senior planner. He gave me another number. Then I went back to the county, spoke to their supervisor, and he said, no, we're right, the planner is wrong. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I do know how they compute that square footage. So I'm just telling you I got two different answers, but I verified it with the county twice, and that's what ended up being the right square footage. I just think that I just don't think this should be built. I'm opposed to it. And I agree that the bulk plane should be back to 12 feet originally, and we won't have to look at these type of dwellings. Thank you for listening to me.
And next we have C. Ann Dickerson.
C. Ann Dickerson, District 1. I'm 3 blocks from this proposed development. Oh, not even that. 2 blocks. Anyway, 1, a flat roof is not in the character of the neighborhood, and it's not wise to do such in a climate like ours where a snow load can overpower the roof. 3, on a flat roof, we see that as a 3rd story, and that's what they're proposing. Even if it's a small thing, it's a 3rd story. That's one characteristic that's wrong. A modern design is not in the character of the neighborhood. That size is not in the character of the neighborhood. If he wants a large house like that, put it on his lot that can accept it. At 3150, he can expand that house without any problems. But what I didn't hear the planner say, he kept saying it meets all the requirements, but he never said what those requirements were. I calculated out, assuming that he was right about the 3125 square foot lot. It's supposed to be 40% lot coverage in the R1 zone. 1,200 square feet it doesn't work with a garage that's, that's the same width. And perhaps, I think they have it 19 and 19. The most the house can have is less than 1,000 square feet in order to meet that lot coverage. There are a lot of anomalies here. I noticed that they have the right address now, but if you go in and look at the meeting materials, it says 3150. The deed says 3150. Arapahoe County says 3146 for this particular lot. So, the deed encompasses all 3 lots, and it's addressed as 3150. There's a problem there. There's a problem with all the meeting materials in the application because they said the subject property was 3150. So we've got the issues of lot coverage. With the garage, they can't have a 1,200 square foot base. This should be a 1-story if they're going to build on this lot. But he shouldn't, if he wants a 2,400 square foot house, why doesn't he just add on to, renovate, or build it on the lot, the 3150 double lot? It will not fit the character of the neighborhood to build this 2-story edifice with a flat roof in a modern design.
So we have an opportunity now for staff and/or the applicant to be able to respond to any of the comments that were brought up during testimony.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a couple of clarifications. So one, as far as the house, it has a garage inside the house. So there wouldn't be a detached garage because the garage is part of the structure. ADUs would not be allowed on this. ADUs are only allowed on small lots and standard lots. So that would be, for this zone district, I believe 37.5-foot wide lots or higher could have an ADU. The ADU or a garage or a shed would all have to go under that same 40% lot coverage requirement. That this house, as it's currently proposed, would be at the upper limits of the lot coverage that they're allowed on this property. So any sort of accessory structure, unless they reduce the proposed house, they wouldn't be able to build those accessory structures. But they're not proposing any accessory structures.
And then in terms of lot size, do we have any direction within the code to say which legal document or something like that we're supposed to go off of for?
I mean, as I said before, it's a lot, like a lot 21 or a lot 22, or I think for this one's it's lot 14. Lots are 25 by 125. If it was something lower than that, it would usually say, the north 22 feet of this lot or the north 24 feet. This one is just lot 14. So, there was mentioned that there was discrepancies between the county number and the city number. As far as the county maps show, and as far as the county maps are, it shows every single kind of house, and it shows their lot width and their lot depth on a kind of map. As far as that shows, it shows a 25 by 125. As far as our dimensions show, it shows a 25 by 125. And as far as any of the engineering or public works maps that we have from dating back to the 50s or 60s, it also shows a 25 by 125, which is 3,125 square feet.
Just as a point of, I think you may find this interesting, but not surprisingly, Englewood's alleys are not pristine. And as a result of being not pristine, over the years, let's just say 100 years or better, oftentimes the property pin is gone because an alley's been graded. It's just no longer available. And so if the lot is stated to be a 125 by 25, and when at such time as assuming this is approved, which you have to assume in the positive, assuming it's approved, they would also be required to site that lot and have that house certified within the confines of that lot. So that should remove any ambiguity regarding what the county has and what we show as the city. Just as an aside, little anecdotally, my home, which has 2 7-ton air conditioners, the county has no record that I have an air conditioner on my property, and I have no idea why. But that's not my problem.
So this would be maybe a follow-up question for both staff and the applicant in terms of our criteria D, which talks about the lot coverage, bulk plane, height setbacks, all of that, and then also how the proposed development would not vary substantially from the surrounding properties or alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So with the drawings that are provided or with other information that's been collected around the neighborhood, is there some way to be able to give us more information about what is the character of the property and how it relates to other properties? Either one.
My wife, Kathy, is a graphic designer and a fine artist, and she isn't going to want to live in some atrocious-looking house, nor do I. I'm sure that we'll make every effort to work with the architect to design something that is complementary to the character of the neighborhood. And you know, in the absence of any, like, homeowners association or any regulations, it seems like a moot point to me.
And can I just ask a quick question in terms of 1-story versus 2-story? You're allowed to go 2 stories. Anyone is allowed in that area to go 2 stories as long as they can meet the bulk plane or whatever other requirements. Did you or your wife look at the options of a 1-story building or any of that?
Yes, and, you know, we, in submitting this proposal, wanted to keep as many options open as possible. So once we gain approval, then, as previously mentioned, we'll have to work with an architect to come up with construction drawings and submit those for permits and go through all that process. In doing so, there's always a possibility that we could change the design and make it 1-story. I don't think that's likely, but I wanted to have as much flexibility with the design as possible before we go through that process.
Thank you. Do you have any other follow-up or clarification for staff or the applicant?
Could I touch on that same question? Since you
Yeah.
directed it towards both as well. You know, I mean, as far as this meeting and this hearing, it's to allow for a structure to be built, not necessarily, you know, that we've been spoiled with the previous ones that they've had, you know, pretty much a full construction kind of drawing. That's not the requirement of these. You know, they can propose, and that's what they've done. They propose what, you know, the max of what they're wanting to do. That's all I would like to add.
I just wanted to ask a few follow-up questions. I might have missed the answers. But how else will this lot be used if not developed in this way?
So this is the only use of this.
The only possible?
Only possible use of this property.
Okay.
Besides a vacant lot.
And then in the past, how has it been used? Just an empty gravel lot?
There is currently a garage on it with a
Okay.
gravel driveway that leads from from Pennsylvania Street all the way to the.
And so currently, the applicants own it, so they just use it as an extra garage?
Correct.
Okay.
Or as the garage, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I have one question for the staff. It's in the Title 16, it's got a section in there. It says, the variance will not permanently impair the use of development of adjacent conforming properties or alter essential character of the neighborhood. That's 16-2-16F1C. I don't know if this is going to change the character of the neighborhood, or it will permanently impair the use of the neighbors' use of their property.
I'll pull up that section real quick, but I believe what the answer is going to be is that that's for a variance. So variances have a set of 4 criteria that they have to abide by. So this is not a variance. This is a completely separate process from a variance. So it wouldn't have to abide by those same 4 criteria.
Okay.
The only criteria that this has to abide by is for any of those modifications, if they were to request them, that are listed out in the staff report. That's also in 16.9, I believe 4. Yeah.
In the description, it says that there is it mentions a 2-story house across the street and a little bit north. But that house is on it's regular, it's a pitched house like that, picture there. 2-story, but it's I think it was 2,300 square feet, and it's for sale right now. But it's on a much bigger lot. It's not on a 25-foot lot.
Correct.
So it actually kind of fits in somewhat because of it has some space on the side of the house. It actually has a sidewalk that goes up to the side of the house, which is the front door, apparently. But anyway, I'm just saying that a 2-story house on that block really doesn't fit in, except for that house, but it's on a larger lot, so it looks a little better.
Yeah, I mean, for houses in this zone district, the max height is the same for this property as it would be for any property that has the 50 feet of lot width, which that house does. And if any homeowner feels that they need more room in their house, they have the opportunity to do, an addition, a vertical, a pop-top addition up to that 32 feet if they so choose. This property isn't asking for addition to that 32 feet, and it would be under that 32 feet.
One thing that I've seen in the development of the lots or scrapes, that once the house is built, like the house across the street is for sale right now, is $710,000. So you're adding a house that's each house on each side of that would sell for maybe $400,000 or whatever, but the rent of the new house is going to be not an affordable house. It's not going to be, one thing that Inglewood is trying to do is get affordable housing for people that really can't afford the bigger houses, and that's not really going to help in that manner.
Carl, I would say, just at this point, we want to make sure we have either a question for the staff, because it sounds a little bit like you're providing your opinion right now, which you're allowed to do, but
it's just,
if you have a question, that would be good to give.
Yeah,
If I could interject, by the development of this house, the intent of the, homeowner would be to move into the current one, or into the new construction. That would allow for the opportunity for a house that's 888-ish square feet to go onto the housing market to allow for another affordable house.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant right now? Okay, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Adams? You're voting to close the public hearing.
oh, yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Freemeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Kinton?
Yes.
Chair Townley?
Yes. Does anyone want to put a motion forward for,
I'd move that we approve this development at the address on Pennsylvania as described and discussed this evening, and move its approval.
Second.
Anyone like to open up discussion?
I think there's a lot of concerns that have been brought up tonight that definitely require some thought, but as to how they apply to this individual decision, I have question.
Any other discussion? Oh, Michelle?
I feel very strongly for the neighbor on the north, that this is a concern of creating a shadow, and I've not seen your garden, but I'm assuming it's extremely lovely, and you've spent years on making it. I'm getting too old to make my gardens as special as probably yours. But unfortunately, at the current state, we don't have either architectural things in code or anything in code that would prevent these people from building a two-story house. So I think we're just sort of in a hard place. I think we have heard your concerns and feel for them, but I don't see anything that can prevent me from voting yes on this. I do hear very strongly, and I'm not that fond of all of the development that's going on, not just in Englewood, but in Denver. These crazy, gigantic, modern-looking blocks of buildings for apartments with a dash of orange here and a dash of green there, I don't find attractive. I'm a Denver native. I'm appalled by all of that. But unfortunately, right now in code, we don't have things to prevent it. So while I feel torn, I think I'm going to have to vote yes, unfortunately, for you.
Carl, did you want to?
I kind of feel the same way that there is no code really against it. The variance, the block plan has been changed in 2015, so it's really quite a bit different story right now. As far as the design of the house, it's to match the neighboring architecture and whatnot. You would need a drawing of the house and what's going to be built. And that's not, we don't have that, so. I myself, I grow a garden and I have my neighbor's trees block the sun on my garden, and I work with them to help with that, but I lose a lot of space because of that. So I have a appreciation of the loss of the sunshine. It's one of the things that Colorado has, many days of sunshine, and we need everything we get. The two-story, I don't, it doesn't really fit the neighborhood, but once again, there's no code that says you can't do that. So I'm not sure how we work that, but there's a lot of houses going in that don't match the neighborhood, and it's taken away from the characteristic of Englewood. But that's progress, and it's creating new housing for the city, which is good, and new income for the city. Not a whole lot on property tax. We don't get that much on property tax, but if it brings people in, that brings in dollars to our stores, so that increases sales tax. So that's one thing there, but that's not, again, that's not regulated by the codes and whatnot, so.
Just two more comments. I've purchased my house in 1986, and I've lived there ever since. I grew up in this part of town. My neighbors put in a fence. Before, there were no fences between my house and the two houses, but, to the south. And it was glorious. Like, we could throw footballs and all that kind of thing, and it was fantastic. But this last year, my neighbor to the south put in a 6-foot fence, and I was shocked by the impact that made mentally. That instead of open borders, I'm not talking national stuff, I'm just talking about being neighborly. To being fenced off from my neighbors was a shock to my system. And I can understand with just a 3-foot setback, a house going up so close to your property line, which is going to be, what, 6 feet? Because it's, 3 feet from their property line and 3 feet, so I can imagine that that's going to be a big adjustment. And then to the people who are the homeowners that are trying to build this, don't build a flat roof. Have some sort of slope to it. Trust me, from me managing my family's business, have some sort of slope to it, because flat roofs are an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we're all Englewood citizens. Sometimes I feel like people think that we're some part of the government, but we're Englewood citizens who volunteer our time to try and hear what people say and give people a voice, and to understand our codes and our zoning. And we spend a lot of time. This isn't arbitrary. But we're all citizens too, and we all love living in Englewood, or we wouldn't have moved here. I've been here since 2008. And I just want to make that point. We aren't some government entity. We're your neighbors. We understand the challenges. And just like other people have described, I have my own challenges with things that neighbors are allowed to do. But the fact is that's part of living in a community. I want to be able to have the freedom to do in my yard, and on my land, in my home, what I want to do, and I have to know that others have that too. And we have our zoning and set up for different zones, that those change, and I agree, there aren't a lot of people involved. We didn't have anybody who wanted to be on this commission. So there are plenty of opportunities for people to be involved. They choose not to be. And that's, we're here because we want to be involved in our community. So that's my little editorial. The question before us today is whether or not they should be able to develop on this lot. It's in an R1C zone district. It allows for a single-family home to be developed. The only reason it's in front of us is because there's never been a property on there before. We've had this come before in the time that I've been on here, which is 2 years now. We've had one other request for this. The fact is there is no reason not to allow this based on the information. This isn't about what I'd like, what I wish, what I'd love to see or not, whether I like development or not. That's not our job here on the commission. Our job is to look at the facts placed before us and make a decision based on that information. And with that, I would absolutely have to vote that this development be allowed.
Thank you. This is always interesting, and I'm going to take this to a different level and then address this particular property specifically. We've heard it said that the property, that the proposed development or the proposed building, the house, would be too big, and that's unacceptable. I think it's unacceptable for one neighbor to tell another neighbor what size home they should live in, as long as it's within the zoning which they bought when they moved in. Everybody has the same right to enjoy their property regardless of whether you like the fact that it's 2 stories or you wish they would have built it 2 stories. I look at a property on Downing and I wonder to myself, why would they tear down a 1-story house to build a 1-story house? I don't understand that. But it's not mine to understand because that's their property and that was their money and that was how they wanted to enjoy their lot within their zoning. So I look at this and I say, it's not mine to judge whether I like the color of a home, the bushes they put around it, whether it's a 2-story or 1-story, whether they want to deal with a flat roof in the future or whether they want a pitched roof, okay? Number 2, I think there's a lot of charm in both new and old development. I think that's what makes Inglewood a different community than what we see on many communities anywhere in the Denver metro. So when we look at what's charming to one is ugly to another. And I think that's a fascinating, beautiful thing about who we are as citizens of this country. We don't have to like what anybody else likes. We are all too quick to be offended by something, and yet we want government somehow to take our right to enjoy our property at the expense of somebody else. So ultimately, it begs the question, if we create a government where it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, it is not easily put back in the box. You open up Pandora's box and you have a problem. That's why we have zoning. And zoning allows us the opportunity to change how things are developed in terms of size, but not the look that it is on one's particular view of beauty versus another. I'm sure the lady of the home that they're planning on building, I'm sure her notion of what looks good is completely different than what mine would be. I know my wife actually says, look, Mike, this goes with this, so wear that today. And that's so much better than what I would otherwise dress. So my view is completely different. But I do know that I think there's a standard that we have in zoning no different than a standard which we have in appropriate attire. And so therefore, when we go into different areas, we either dress differently for the occasion or we build differently based on the zoning. It's no different. I do not want a government that picks and chooses and suddenly feels that they have wisdom today to pick and choose what happens and virtually takes the ability of somebody to enjoy the property which they purchased knowing what the zoning was. And with that taking, if we think about that from and I don't pretend to practice law in the street here, Dugan, but if I get out of line, let me know, but I believe the Supreme Court has ruled consistently and categorically across all property matters like this, regardless of whether it's in Inglewood, Colorado, or New York City, that zoning is king. And if you buy that zoning and the city takes something from you that you otherwise had, that is a compensable event. So if we want to talk about affordable housing, try paying for taking every other neighbor's ability to actually enjoy their property as they purchased it and zoned it, and it was zoned. That, I can't even imagine what that is. But let's talk about this property specifically. When I look at this and I think to myself, well, okay, let's go back to a discussion we had 22 months ago, Brooke, and I believe you had mentioned, sir, that there was a house in question, not dissimilar to this, but also that had a peaked roof as opposed to a flat roof. It had a hip roof. And so we went at great lengths to understand the angle of the sun relative to the positioning of Inglewood, Colorado on the face of the planet Earth. And what we learned was, in fact, that you can be 3 feet and 3 feet and still have sun at the base of your property at such time as the greatest or the steepest angle to the sun, okay? And so while that may feel like somebody would be in the dark all the time, they in fact are not. So I believe your garden, and I'm just telling you what I understand to be true based on the geometry that was previously pointed out to us. I'm pretty sure your garden is going to be okay, but if it's not, there's really not much we can do about that. We can't pick what somebody's garden is, and we can't pick what a neighbor's is. What we can do is we can look at the code, and we can say, this in fact, they're not asking for any variances, so that has nothing to do with 1695. It is in conformance with 1694 of our Uniform Development Code, which was passed in 2014 unanimously by this commission and was passed unanimously, as I recall, by the city council at the time. Number two, we do find ourselves in a position where we do not judge the character of a neighborhood, we judge the criteria by which the zoning is established. And this property, as it's put forward to us, clearly is within that zoning. I do believe that it also has, the proposed development is consistent with the spirit of the comprehensive plan, which has been, whether people like it or not, it has been approved by the city council and with that, and subject to that, is also the objectives as outlined under C. Furthermore, under lot coverage, bulk plane, height, setbacks, et cetera, we are told and we believe that it will be within that, within the zoning or within the zone or the area of the particular lot in question. Whether it's 1,200 square feet or 2,400 square feet, I commend the applicant for in fact going for the maximum and then working through the building process so that they have the opportunity to build that which is acceptable. No different than we would commend somebody for having a garden. We would commend somebody for making an investment to beautify as they see fit on their property. I really believe that Inglewood is in transition. I do not believe under any way, shape, or form that anybody has the right to remove one's right as a property owner because they want government to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We do not pick winners and losers. We do not choose one neighbor over another. And I can appreciate the fact that the neighbors have had conversation. I do not believe this is necessarily the time nor the place to discuss that which somebody does or does not like regarding a particular ordinance that was passed a few years ago regarding bulk plane, and then subjecting somehow this property owner who by any other time would be able to simply come in and get this done. It's not germane, it's not topical, it's not relevant, and it's not part of this conversation. I would argue, lastly, that other properties have been put up that have been like this. They do not find themselves in a position where they impinge or infringe or in any way diminish the neighbors, but it does change the neighborhood. And I dare say you walk down most streets in Inglewood, if you choose to do so, and the neighborhood looks much better than what it did 8, 10 years ago, frankly, when I moved in. No, I didn't necessarily improve the neighborhood. That's not what I'm saying. But things progress, and I commend the applicant for wanting to build on this lot. I think it's going to be an improvement on the lot itself. I think it's going to be an improvement in the neighborhood. We can talk about taxes if you'd like. I'm a pretty simple guy, so let's just say you've got a $300,000 valuation, and the tax money that comes to the city, we'll say, is $500. If that new valuation is $900,000, let's just say that the city's only going to get $1,500, but the same police officer that drives by is going to have the same wage, regardless of whether it's a $500 property tax bill or $1,500 goes to the city. But the same police officer is going to drive by. We can bury our heads in the sand, and we can look at that, and we can say, no, we don't want to do this. And then maybe we should think about subcontracting other essential city services, such as fire. Ooh, that hurt. But that's how we pay for things. We pay for things by tax revenues. We pay for things by sales tax revenues. And people pay taxes based on the valuation. I dare say the neighborhood would improve in the valuation. I can say from a home that I'm familiar with on Corona, my neighbors have been doing just fine as a result and have not necessarily improved their property. And no, their taxes didn't go up by 3 times. But I feel pretty strongly about this. Zoning is king, and that's all there is to it. And the rest of it is a subset about one's personal opinion. And so I think we have a Uniform Development Code adopted in 2014 that really requires us to vote yes. Whether we like it or not is immaterial. And I want to thank the applicant for bringing this forward. I will be voting yes.
Seems like we're ready to call the vote.
Mr. Evans, how do you vote?
For it. Yes.
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 I'm going to give it a yes.
Would you like Mr. Freemeyer to recap any of what he said to add to the findings of the fact? Okay.
Mr. Hinton,
Yes.
Chair Townley.
I am also going to vote yes on this, and I will say that we definitely take your testimony to heart, and we do listen to that, and we do, we appreciate people coming out and telling us what they think, and it is something that we do listen to the citizens and what they're thinking about different properties. And I appreciate all the care that you're putting into your property in terms of caring for your garden and having that be a community benefit, and I appreciate, the applicant and what they're looking to do with their property to also improve it and be a value to the community as well. I feel as though the proposed property meets all of the criteria for the non-conforming lot, or for the small lot size. It could not be developed otherwise. It's going to be developed within the permitted uses within the zone district. That it would need to have some sort of the zoning change in order to allow the development to occur. I agree that it's within the spirit of the comprehensive plan in terms of the LIVE objectives and providing new opportunities for different housing types and housing mixes, and also to encourage home ownership and allow for housing that meets all family sizes, income groups, and whatnot. The proposal meets all of the lot coverage, the bulk plane, the setbacks, and the massing of the proposed development. And from what we can see, they're not proposing something that is, we don't have a definition necessarily of what the character is of the area. We have a variety of different housing types, and they're not asking for anything that would be different than what other homeowners would be asking for. So anyone else on the block is allowed to go 2 stories in the same height as well. And then finally, I believe that agree that the proposal is compatible with the established development patterns and the intent of the zone district as well. So I vote yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. So we're done with the public hearing part. Does anyone need to take a break before we talk about bulk plane?
I would love one. Just a couple
Like
minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah, or less.
Table this?
Would you like to table it for better discussion?
We have a motion. I'll second the motion to table the rest of the agenda.
I would still like to go through staff's choice and those other pieces, but I wouldn't mind taking the motion to table bulk plane.
Okay.
For,
I'd like to make a motion that we table bulk plane until the next meeting.
I'll second that. No, I believe we should look at that in the future.
do we need to include that in the amendment, or in the motion? Sorry. For a specific date?
To be determined?
Brooke, I'm sure you'd appreciate a fresh commission to go through the information.
That would be November 5th.
Okay.
So, Ms. Brown and Mr. Freemeyer, is that, are you agreeable?
Sure.
So motion to table to the bulk claim discussion to November 5th?
Yes.
I'll second that.
You want to do a roll call or just?
By affirmation or?
By affirmation works.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Then are you okay going through the last final things without a break?
I'll cross my legs. Sorry, I've been drinking,
Okay,
you know,
so
the equivalent of water, but I'll do what I can, yeah.
we'll move forward to number 7, staff's choice.
I don't have anything to add at this time. You, Wade?
I just want to provide an update. Many of you may know already that short-term rentals was remanded back to this board last night by City Council
Yay.
to further discuss enforcement provisions as well as the use of ADUs as short-term rentals. We will be developing a timeline for when that will be back before you, but I just wanted you to know that it will be coming back to you.
Can I ask some questions about that? Just to prepare us for
Certainly.
what the process would be. So I know we have maybe different people on the commission from when we voted before. But something like ADUs, which is essentially a yes, no, and it being sent back to us essentially that we need to change our minds, or?
It is not necessarily that you need to change your minds. If you want to stay with what you originally recommended, that is what we will take back to council. And then council has the option to change the ordinance on their own will.
Did they say why they didn't just change it?
The
Instead of
bigger
sending it-
concern was with developing an enforcement mechanism or procedure that can be discussed at the same time as the full ordinance itself.
But, I'm sorry. When we had this before, we specifically said enforcement was not our purview.
Sorry.
Am I wrong?
Well, let me tell.
I'm not,
I
I'm
know.
just asking the
But
question.
let me tell you what we are doing is we have contracted with the third-party enforcement agency. So in the very, very near future, we will be sending approximately 100 to 150 cease and desist letters at the direction of several council members and the city manager. So we have not stopped in terms of enforcement. I am going to need to talk more with City Attorney Brown to figure out what, and I don't know, Dugan, if you know more, I need a little more clarification on what enforcement they're wanting to look at. But that language has to be developed, and then it will be presented to you, whatever it may be, and I apologize, I'm not really sure right now what that is, in addition to what we are already doing with the third-party enforcement agency.
So this third party is one of those ones we talked about, or you brought forward. They sort of look at all of the addresses that are advertising on Airbnb and,
Correct.
you know, the other different venues, VRBO and,
So our enforcement plan was that we had two options, and we therefore had two contracts. We had a contract with them that would send the cease and desist letters to all those operating right now without the ordinance, or if the ordinance had failed, we would have still enforced that way. If the ordinance had passed, or if it will pass, we would then set up the permitting and registration procedure
with the revocation clause and then future municipal court actions if they still continue. So
there's really nothing that can be enforced right now, is there? Or is there?
well, all of the short-term rentals are illegal that are operating
Okay.
today. So the third-party company will provide the list of all of those homeowners, and they will get letters to cease operation of their short-term rental, absent an approved ordinance that says they can be permitted and registered.
And so you're going to get those phone calls, not us.
Probably.
Is there a set process that Inglewood has for licensing
No.
of short-term rentals?
Well, the ordinance would have set that up. So we would have had a process to where the addresses would all have been identified, and they would have been given 60 days per ordinance to come into compliance, which means registering with the Community Development Department, but establishing their sales tax permits, their lodging revenues with finance, and then we would track that on a renewable yearly basis through a sister IT program to what our finance department already uses. So they would have, the programs will tie together. So if you do have an ADU or an STR, you would be registered, and then it would automatically follow into the finance part of it. So
If we could get it through city council.
Yeah, it seems like if there was a license, enforcement would be easier because you say, do this or we'll take your license away.
well, and that's what the
I
ordinance
have an
would
idea.
have said.
Why don't we do this? Appreciate the update that it's coming back to us.
Right.
There's all sorts of things. We've got new new commission members here, potentially new council members, and let's see how that all works out.
That's true, new council.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Providing an update.
Wade? Attorney's choice. Okay, and sorry, there wasn't any other staff choice, right? Okay. Okay?
It is imperative for all of you to email me, text me, call me, and let me know, especially if we're having a public hearing, if you're coming or not coming to the meeting. So, my nag is coming out. So if you would prefer to text me, or have me text you, email me your number, and then I will text you.
On this past email, I was confused because in the email it said, if you're not attending, let me know. And so I second guessed myself, but moving forward, I'll for sure email you.
I will echo that as part of my commissioner's choice. Please, please let Nancy know either way, or if you know in advance that you're going to be missing specific meetings, that way we can plan ahead if we know we're not going to make a quorum or anything like that, especially if we have these public hearings coming up. And as you know, there's a lot of time that goes into preparing for these meetings, and if we have to cancel or something like that at the last minute, it does not work well for staff either. That's all I had. Any other commissioner's choice?
Just real quick, sorry, Brooke, you could have gone home if I told you I was going to ask to take.
No, that's fine.
Okay, sorry.
Don't apologize for getting out on time.
I know.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.